Good evening. I'm Joshua Free, and welcome to another edition of Mardukite Theatre.
"I can't believe you're making me move in my senior year," Jenny shouted as she carelessly tossed a half-filled box of clothes across her bedroom. When no response came from outside the closed door, she quietly and complacently returned to her packing. Jenny Stinger had spent the better part of the first 17 years of her life in the bedroom she now was struggling to sort into boxes or discard. She was realistic enough to know that it was not all going to be able to come with her. From what she suspected about where she was headed, she was surprised she was able to take any of her old world belongings with her. 2 decades of life on Earth certainly allowed for a lot of accumulation, much of which she could easily do without. She had noticed her taste toward things changing recently. When once the material things and trinkets had been glimmers of beauty and excitement in the world, now they too became pale and hollow symbols of a life that was already fading into memory. She slammed her fist on the desk of the dresser bureau. Everything was changing. Life in the small township of the Dolls had suited Jenny just fine. All of the essentials a simple girl of 17 required were available to her growing up, and what was not right there was merely a day trip following along the Columbia River to Portland. Even some of this had changed too, keeping pace with the world that seemed to be dissolving before her eyes, starting with her bedroom, mirrored with her family, and certainly with her planet. It was a lot for any teenager to absorb, especially in the year 2019. Now, when Jenny was born, the world had already begun manifesting as a very different place than what many had remembered during their own lifetime. The technologies were unquenchable, driven to rise to new unfathomable heights, fueled by unknown sources. The paranoia of the people against authorities, and of authorities against people, was streaming toward critical mass, and nearly all of the world's commerce was coming into the control of a few powerful corporations, or rather, individuals. Everyone was watching as it happened, always though waiting to act for when this big thing would hit, but it never did. The transition was slow and sure, discriminating, predestined. Although she had not been alive to remember anything of the hysteria among the population concerning the new millennium, she was celebrating her 10th birthday when all of the Earth's nations waited to see if the world would end on December 22nd, 2012. Seemingly, nothing happened. But while nothing was happening, several world leaders passed laws in their respective countries similar to what the United States called the Doomsday Act, in honor of the day of its activation. No one was present to vote against it. They were all too busy in their homes, afraid, waiting for the world to end. And in a matter of speaking, it did, silently and unobserved. The new laws were handing the power of the nations over to the wealthiest of organizations and families. Given the most global governments had all become bankrupt to the Earth Bank, it was left to the large corporations, shareholders of the Earth Bank, to discern and manage what was necessary for the planet. Immediately they unveiled their plans to protect humanity with the use of archaeological cities, self-sustaining, usually walled or contained. The people questioned quietly, of course, protection from what? But not long after it started happening, hospitals were filling up with various cases of new and untreatable ailments. The most common affliction was quickly known as the black cough, mainly named for the color of the mucus being expelled from the lungs. Even though the black cough was not contagious, it was considered the worst because it meant for a long, painful pathway to inevitable death. Meanwhile, the victim endured the slow degradation of all organ cells in the body. Millions had already died or faced death from this. Of all of them, though, the most controversial and mysterious remains to be so because of how well it can be hidden to avoid embarrassment and the absence of the people who seem to have had serious cases among the population. Victims start to notice scaly green patches on their skin that are first mistaken as bruises that seem to last for days, weeks, or even months without healing. Even when they begin to spread, folks are generally able to conceal them until finally it has completely overtaken the body. When this happens, the person is so lizard-like that people came to call this disease reptilianism. The transition made people feel ill, as the cells in their body were rapidly changed and divided, but it was not terminal as far as anyone knew. Counterculture conspiracy theorists were so enamored at the chance to call people's attention to this new genetic mutation among the population, using these examples to fuel the logic that, in spite of an uneventful 2012, some hybrid race of alien Illuminati were still going to take over the world. Of course, while they had waited for this chance to enlarge their theories and write books, the corporations had already succeeded in world domination. What seemed to make matters worse was that while appearing sickly and non-human, those suffering from reptilianism eventually benefited from what some would call heightened sentences, rather than diminished ones. This earned them a new social label, freaks, and sent them into exile faster than authorities could capture them for research. Last month, Jenny found the first pale green patch on her upper leg. She was scared, and now she was being moved to a big city for all to see.